regular meeting of the Board of Directors, School Board Administrative District number 52. We're going to start off with a pledge of allegiance led by Jamie Johnson.
I believe allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, starting a new pattern here. The budget season is upon us, and our very first order of business is the budget work session. We all have our books, and I think we're going to essentially jump right into this with a superintendent's overview. So, Carrie, feel free to take it away.
Jump in. It's game time. Gabby and I are wearing our uniforms. We did not plan that, but I feel like it kind of,
have to moving
I kind of feel like it fits, like it's game time and we're doing this. So when I put this presentation up on the TV, some of the words are really small, so I've got printouts for you guys to be able to follow along. I said, oh, those words are very small. That's not helpful. Are you good?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, talk to myself. We're good.
so I know for you guys, it's gonna be a little bit behind, but I think I tend to wanna point things out, but I'm gonna make sure that you guys all can follow along with the presentation that we have. So I'm gonna encourage you at any time to tell me to stop if you have questions, things like that. The real nitty gritty details are gonna come when the principals and directors go through the executive summaries, and then obviously when we go through each warrant article, if you remember from last year, and Bree, you're new to this process, but that's when we'll really get down into. So for me, this is broad strokes, bird's eye view. Gabby and I were reflecting this morning how much better we feel about this process, having done it one time this year, going into it, feeling like we have so much more information and feel like, even though we made a huge amount of progress in the finances last year in the budget, we've made even more progress so that the confidence in the numbers and the process has just grown. So we're feeling like we're in a good place to get going on this really important work that we have to do. Okay, so this is sort of our initial budget. If you remember last year, the numbers are gonna adjust each week as we find a new thing. You know, we were just talking about a couple things this morning that we know will be adjusted for next time. So, and as we get more information from the state, as numbers may or may not change. So each week we'll provide you with an update. You'll get different colored sheets so that you can keep track of which is the most recent one. And follow along with any changes that we're gonna make. Okay, so last time when I did this, I kind of slapped up the strategic plan goals, and it's like, yeah, you know, we're following that thing. And I just felt like I should put them up there, and this year it felt really good to be able to put up these things as reminders to you that they are actually the things that we're saying we're gonna do. So I've highlighted a couple of areas, and this in particular was the part I was like, those words are too small, but I didn't want to spend like 8 slides on it because you guys have been so much more involved in that work. So this budget is gonna really focus in on several goals. So the first one is on curriculum. So this budget helps us continue to work on the targets that we've set for having certain curriculums done by the end of the school year of 2025. Another set of curriculums by the end of the school year of 2026. And it also includes additional funds to increase activities and co-curriculars. That was something that was a goal in the strategic plan, and this budget does do that. The next set of goals that we had is around staff in terms of recruitment and retention, and this budget reflects a significant investment in pay and benefits for a vast majority of our employees, because that was something that we had identified as an issue. The teacher contract was settled last year. We're in negotiations with ESP. We'll start negotiations with ASME, which is the custodians and bus drivers next. That investment has been made, and the hope will be that we start to see the payoff of that by a reduction in the amount of turnover that we've seen and in hiring and filling positions that have been unfilled for a while. It also represents an investment in teacher leadership. One of the things that we wanted to really think about was paid leadership opportunities existed at the middle school and high school. They did not exist at the elementary level, and this budget reflects an investment in making sure that leadership is honored and respected with a stipend the way it is at other grade levels. So this budget reflects that as well. Around the school environment goal, it continues the work of the district safety committee. We're on track to begin a revision of our emergency plans for each building this summer. We are working on developing comprehensive safety training for all staff across all all categories of workers. We are improving transportation, communication, and efficiency, maximizing the contracts that we already have. Bus ride is the one that comes to mind. And we have begun those initial conversations around developing a capital improvement plan. The PTB met with EEI a couple weeks ago and saw the initial draft of projects that we have. And we have the go-ahead to work on getting the wastewater treatment plant completed finally. So I feel like lots of really good progress there in terms of that goal. And then the final goal is around climate and support. It represents a continued investment in MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support. That would include PBIS, it includes interventions for kids when there's learning loss or they're behind. We continue with the bar implementation, grades 7, 8, and 9. I heard from Evan, next year, the goal is to roll that into grade 10. Is that right? It continues the implementation of curriculum at the primary and elementary grades. And then also one of the areas was making sure that kids had access to daily sort of opportunities to build community in morning meeting, crew, and HPT. So it represents an investment in that by adding some leadership around HPT at the high school. So when I go through the strategic plan, that's sort of what I see as some of the highlights. A lot of things are continuing things, but those are particular steps forward that we've made. So budget context, I provided you this data last year. I'm just gonna say the state number, I do not know why it's 23, like it's so big. I've emailed people at the state, it just came out a week ago. Last year, this number was like 18 something. So I don't know why that number is specified. So I've sent an email to be like, hey, why are you guys saying you're spending 23,000? That's more than they spend in Greeley, which I don't think is true. So, but it gives you a sense of where we are in the districts around us in terms of what we're spending per pupil. This is a state calculated number. This is not a number that we've calculated. And you can go on one of the data dashboards at the DOE to find this information. So it gives you a sense of where we are with our neighbors in terms of what we're investing per pupil. In my mind, it gives a sense of like, all right, we're not outrageous. We're not at the bottom. You know, we are sort of being responsible in that way from my perspective in terms of what that looks like, the cost across other districts. Just to give you a reminder of enrollment, this is where we are this year. We submitted October 1,999, then get one more kid, get to 2,000, but slowly rebuilding from the great drop off in 2020. Which a lot of districts experienced and I think have not bounced back quite as quickly, I think, as we have. So that's a really important number. It's one of the reasons why our subsidy increases, because we're bringing kids back. Last year, I provided you with information about the types of teachers that we're hiring. I estimated last year that 18% of our new teachers were less than 3 years of experience. The state finally updated those numbers. So the state percentage went up. You can see the years before that, it was 13% and we were below that. The state's now at 16% and now we're at the state average. I looked at a couple of the school districts. Some are way over, but several are below that. So we're probably sort of in the middle of the road, depending on those around us. Lewiston School District, I looked on theirs, they're at like 26% of teachers who are under and free. I'm sure given your position, you know that. Yep. So we're certainly not in that position, but I saw a couple districts that were at 13%. So we are this, I anticipate when I did a quick look at who's on staff this year, 18% of the staff that we have as teachers have less than 3 years of experience. So that's about what we had last year. Okay, so when we start the budget process, we talk about what do we need to do to fund the current project programs that we have now? Nothing new, just keep things moving. So what you will see in this budget is that increase in salaries and insurance. Insurance was something that we've been working to standardize across all areas, across all employees. So the budget anticipates that or plans for that, if that ends up being what we decide to do. And it also reflects those investments that we've made in salary. So that is about a $2.3 million investment that we've made that is reflected in the budget. Increase in special education out-of-district tuition, $121,000. These are schools that we send our students to outside of the district. They have increased their tuition anywhere between 7% and 16%. We just got those numbers right before vacation, and so had to do a little scramble on Monday to sort of make sure the budget was accurate for that. We had not anticipated that, that number. So what you have in front of you does reflect what we anticipate to be that increase. If you remember, we have started the Margaret Murphy program within our own district at Korean Central School, and our goal is to hopefully slow down the amount of students who are being sent to the out-of-district placements. Margaret Murphy is still considered an out-of-district, but because it's operated in our own building, we don't pay as much as if we were sending kids to Margaret Murphy in Auburn or Worcester, wherever those buildings are. There's a new earned paid leave law that is causing us lots of consternation because we don't quite know what to anticipate. So the law passed last year and the state is in the process of setting this up, this new earned paid leave system. I will just editorialize and say, I think the law is targeted at employers who do not provide any paid leave. School districts provide really good paid leave. People get paid sick days, they have access to a sick bank, they can accumulate sick days over multiple years, as many as 140, 150. So I think we're gonna have some tension. The understanding I have around the state from school districts, superintendents, main school management, who are sort of looking at this, and certainly it's come up in negotiations around what we're gonna do with this. I think there's a little bit of a tension there, but what we have been given for guidance is that beginning next January, we need to start contributing, even though there's no real system yet and there's no real rules yet. The state has hired a director, so they're putting things together, but we have been given the guidance to start contributing to this system beginning next January. So Gabby will go into the details of that, but that ultimately, that contribution right now has added $112,000 to our budget. It's a new payroll tax, like Social Security. It's what we pay main purse. So it's not an option. I don't know how this law will play out. I don't know what it will look like for employers who are operating with decent earned paid leave, but for right now, that's the guidance. And so all school districts have budgeted for this amount based on the guidance we've been given. So $112,000 of the budget reflects that. We purchased we budgeted for 2 passenger vans. Both vans are well over 200,000 miles on them. We got out of needing to budget for van replacements because we were able to use some of the COVID money that came in. So we were able to not pay for those in a rotation of replacement, but that money is dried up. So we need to start picking that back up. So we had the vans before, we purchased new ones using that grant money. Now the grant money is gone, so we need to go back to replace. And this also reflects salary adjustments for the technology director and assistant special ed director. Technology director's salary was substantially below the region, and we did not believe that that was appropriate. And the assistant special ed director, we've switched her position to a year-round position. It was not year-round prior to this. And the responsibilities of case management for out-of-district students, training of ed techs, all those things have really increased the workload for that position and for the special ed director as well. So when we go through the budget, you will see those two changes. Okay, so before we ever got to this point, we've also done some reductions. So principals went through their supply lines and we've reduced instructional supply lines across the district by $30,000. So that's contributions from each school, some schools more, some schools less, depending on what their budgets originally looked at. We've done a general $10,000 reduction in the initial budget that was put together for technology supplies across the district. And, you know, when these individuals, like when Wally and the principals, if you want to know what they cut, you know, you can ask them that. I sort of pulled it into one big thing. This is like a huge shout out to Wally. So we were not a part of MLTI for 9th grade, but MLTI will provide computers for 9th grade. So this year, the budget money that we had, which was what was the budget money this year for high school computers? 57,000. We have not needed to purchase computers because we were able to do that with MLTI. So we're going to use that money this year to purchase next year's. So that money's cut from next year's budget. We are not budgeting for 9th grade computers because we are able to get those through the MLTI program. So normally that would be an annual cost of like, it's just part of the rotation of replacing devices once they hit their lifespan. We will not need to do that this year. And I think going forward with staying in MLTI, we won't likely need that huge pot of money because we'll be able to sort of transition computers in a smaller batches. Wally can again explain that more. This hurt Wally to take this money out. We appreciate the sacrifice. We cut about $230,000 worth of maintenance projects. So Wally, it did not hurt as much. And certainly Dave can talk about what those were. What we left in had a lot to do with safety. The water here at Turner Primary has stayed in the budget. That has been an ongoing issue we need to resolve so that the water tanks project of replacement here will take place. School security, cameras, things like that has stayed in. But larger projects, primarily paving, and a big cement project to finish off the high school bleacher project, those things have been removed. And again, once we get to that warrant article, you can ask more questions about that. But that was from the original budget that they submitted, that's what's been removed. So also, we are responding to population needs and budget concerns. We've talked a lot about the growing needs of Turner Primary and Turner Elementary with the number of students who are in those schools. So we've reallocated a couple of positions. So Turner Primary needs a 2nd grade teacher. Their bubble has come up each year. A teacher's been added to a grade level starting back in kindergarten prior to Kim and my arrival. So each grade has 5 classrooms. So the current 2nd grade only has 4. Next year it will need 5. So we've added a 2nd grade teacher position over there. That is a reallocation of a Green Central School teacher position, and that is because Green Central School's class sizes have shrunk in 2 grades. So those grades, that position is being moved to Turner Primary. The Turner Elementary Dean of Students, the budget includes the Dean of Students for Turner Primary, but because it's in this budget, it's not part of like a new position. Turner Elementary Dean of Students position that we're recommending, that also will be a reallocated position from Green due to reduced enrollment there. So those are positions where we're following where the kids are, just pure and simple, where the numbers are and where the resources need to go. And then finally, we are going to be recommending a special ed team leader position right now. Those are stipended positions. We are recommending that a full-time position move into Turner Elementary and Turner Primary to support the growth of that population. And that is also a reallocated position from Green Central School. That is an unfilled special ed position. It has been unfilled for 2 years now, 2 years. And currently the students are being served by Margaret Murphy staff. We're contracting with them to separately provide resource classroom support to those students who need services from that unfilled special ed position. And we're gonna continue with that model. It's something that is working, that we feel comfortable with and confident about, that kids are getting the needs that they have met. And so we're gonna use that position and move it over here to serve the elementary term primary programs. And then finally, we had one remaining instructional coach in grant funds. That was last year, it's rotated each year, but last year it was the Turner Primary Instructional Coach. We are gonna move that into the budget this year. So when you get to Turner Primary, you're gonna see 3 positions that are in the teacher line that are gonna indicate like a huge jump. And Kim will remind you of that when you get to that. But Leeds Central School is the school with the most eligibility for Title I, which is additional federal funding for poverty schools. So we are gonna move the Leeds instructional coach into Title I. That position's unfilled right now. We weren't able to hire somebody. The person who was the instructional coach last year transitioned back into the classroom at Tripp Middle School. So that position's been unfilled. It won't change anything about, it's still a teacher position on the contract, whatever, just the funding will come from Title I. I'll just say Teresa's not here. She's not super enthusiastic about that. But for next year anyway, we feel confident in the funding. If at any point, we don't really get knowledge about what our Title I funding is until summertime. So we know we have enough carryover money to cover this position for next year. If we should get a drop in Title I funding, so we may, if that Title I funding drops next year, we may have to come back and say Title I's not a way for us to fund that position anymore. But that is what we will be doing to maintain the current staffing. So we have a couple of items. Just get myself caught up on my notes, make sure I don't miss anything. So we have a couple of new positions, additional positions in response to enrollment increases in student needs. And primarily, these are educational technicians and special education. So 3 additional ed tech 3s at the high school to support 2 different programs, this transition program and functional support program. That's largely due to increased student enrollment and also needing to support, if you remember when Rebecca gave her presentation back in green, we are having to work with older students because the law has changed about eligibility. So we really need to support community work programs for those students, and that really requires staff. You need to have staff to go with students who are going into the community. So that's one set, and then again, due to student enrollment in the functional support program that's at Leeds, we've added an additional ed tech there for students we know that are coming in that we need to provide services for. The other position that has been added is an athletic trainer for to serve the high school and the middle school. I provided you updates on that when we learned that our contract with St. Mary's was canceled at Christmas time. We have made the decision that the only reasonable thing that we can do to ensure that we have services for students, for our student athletes, is to put this as a full-time position in the budget. It will serve a couple of ways. One, the middle school doesn't currently get any training services. Any issues that happen there are dealt with by families and the school nurse occasionally. Again, Janet and Evan can speak more to this. But that person also will serve as game worker supervisor at games. Right now, we don't have those positions in place. And the athletic director is stretched as thin as possible. And so this will provide us with a way to get game coverage by an employee who's already on staff. So it broadens the job description of that person. So they're not just going to be doing training. They will be doing other responsibilities in support of the athletic director. And because we have money in that contract right now, in the current budget, 23,500 is the current contract amount. That reduces what the total increase. A typical position when it's the teacher level is about 78,000 if you count both salary and benefits. So it's not as much of an increase because we already have a pot of money there that's just going to be allocated to that position. The other position we're adding, but will have no impact on the budget, is a board certified behavior analyst. Is that what BCBA?
Yes.
I got that right, okay. BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. This is a position we currently contract for. It will be paid completely out of local entitlement, which is another source of special ed funding that we get that is separate from the allocation we get from the state. We have gotten to the point, we really feel like we need to have somebody on staff who can provide direct services to staff and students who are trying to make sure that kids are able to access the strategies and interventions they need when their struggles are not academic, but are in fact behavioral. And so feel like that's an important addition to not having just the contracted service, but to have somebody who is our own employee. So it's there, it's an additional position, but it's not funded through the budget that we're going to be looking at. It's funded out of local entitlement, which is an annual pot of money that we get to support special education. And then finally, the only other position we've added is a district-wide unassigned custodian. So this is a custodian who would serve as a utility, well, we call the bus driver utility bus driver, right? They're a utility custodian. We currently budget about $32,000 for subs. We do not have any subs. And the central office right now, we have 10 hours of cleaning a week, and it is not enough. There's a lot of traffic in central office with a lot of students in adult ed and people there in the afternoon and evenings for classes. And it is not appropriately cleaned. It's not adequately cleaned. And the 10 hours a week we have is from an employee who's a bus driver who comes in and does additional hours, which is great. They're one of our own employees, but we cannot continue to operate with that. So rather than add hours of cleaning to central office, we eliminated all of the sublines, the money from sublines, which covers about half of this position. And this would sort of help to cover when schools don't have a custodian. We would be able to sort of pull that person in and take care of things as they need to and as they have it. So a couple items, and there may be others, but I'll just highlight a couple that aren't in here. So one of the things we talked about in the strategic plan was communications and improving communications and working with a consultant, some kind of outside consultant. We actually were able to receive approval for using some of our title funding for working with communication firm around crisis communication. So that's going to dovetail in with our emergency plan sort of reboot to make sure that when we're communicating with families and the community, when things happen, that people are getting the information they need, and we feel confident about how to do that. So that amount of money has been approved within the grant. The Title I grants allow you to do projects that involve school safety. So we're able to do that. We just got that approval this morning. Teresa notified me from her hospital bed. She's fine, by the way. She was wide awake and excited about the grant. So just a little side note, there were multiple other special ed positions requested that have not been put into the budget, and the multiple minor capital improvement plan things are also not in there. So again, when we get to those warrant articles and those directors can talk specifically about it. Okay, so there are things that we don't know right now. So I'm gonna just try to give you a quick sort of overview of that. We do not know what the actual increase for our insurance will be. If you remember last year, it's sort of like down to the very last minute. We're scheduled to approve a budget by April 4th. We will at the very least know what the worst case scenario will be for insurance by the end of March before April 4th. So we've budgeted for the worst case scenario. 10%. That's what we did last year. That's pretty much what school districts do, just because if it comes in at 11%, it's not a disaster because we're pretty close to that. So that is an unknown. If it comes in low, which we're fairly optimistic it will come in below, it's a significant amount of money. But talking about it before it happens is bad luck. So we're just not going to do that. I learned right before vacation. So LRTC, which is the regional technical center that we send our students to, opened a satellite campus on Edward Little when the Edward Little School opened this fall. It added programs to LRTC, which is great because there's more seats for our kids. How many more kids, Evan? Like 25 more kids? I feel like it's 25 more of our kids can now go to an LRTC program, which is awesome because there's always kids on the wait list. I know this as a former high school principal in this area, you just can't get all the kids who want to go in. However, they are now experiencing costs that, I don't know if they didn't anticipate, but maybe we're hoping that it really wasn't going to be a problem. So it's possible that we will see some kind of request for funding to help support that LRTC program. The agreement that we have right now within the region, within all the sending schools, is that none of us pay anything. It's just, we don't budget for it. The full subsidy from the state sort of pays for that. Lewiston pays a substantial portion, but they also have a ton of seats. Half the kids at LRTC, I think, are Lewiston high school kids, is that right? So the benefit for them hosting it is that their kids benefit. But they're having to spend a lot of money on transporting kids between. We're now doing that as well. Jim, Rob Callahan, who's the director, says a shout out to Jim frequently about helping to support transportation between the two places. But initially, they were thinking it would be $30,000. I talked to Rob the other day. He's like, it may not be that. So it's not in the budget right now. We have not put it in because we don't know what that money is. And it wasn't a clear directive. So I anticipate they're going to ask us to contribute. What I've asked Rob Callahan to do is for us to maybe start to look at the agreement so that it can be something a little bit more formal and not sort of like year by year, how much money do they need? But that's to be determined. We're still in negotiations for ESP. We're about to start for ASME, which is the bus drivers and custodians. We're in negotiations with school administrators, so those things are still not determined. We've anticipated what we think those increases will be, so there's money in the budget, but they're not finalized, so we don't have like an actual number yet. And we're still in negotiations. TTEA, which is the teacher one, when we settled that contract last year, we agreed to reopen depending on the insurance, and if it came in under 10%, that we would agree to reopen it. So once we know that in March, if it comes in under 10%, then that part of the contract will be reopened, and we will look at what that is. And we're currently looking at stipends. And so that was another part of that contract when we settled it, that we agreed this year to create a stipend committee to study stipends and look at adjusting them. Again, we've sort of built in some funds for that, but we don't know the exact numbers yet. So those things are still out in process that we can't sort of say, we know the exact numbers. So the current budget that we're working with right now, you can see each warrant article, what the increases are. The total budget increase is 8.1% right now. Last year, I think we were at 7.2, I think 7.9. So it's a relatively even increase. And again, we're going to go warrant article by warrant article so that you can look at what each of those increases really look like. I offer this pie chart for you again, just to remind you that the vast majority of our money goes into our schools. That's everything that's green and is people. 80% of our budget is people. Because we are we are like the only industry ever that can't go to virtual, us and healthcare, although healthcare has got more and more. But so like that's where the money is. That's where the money is. So this budget continues that sort of like we're putting our money into our schools, directly impacting our kids, and that money is the human beings that are transporting our kids and cleaning the floors so they can work in an environment that's appropriate, and the people who we hire to care for them and educate them. All right, so Gabby, this is going to be your show after I review the ED 279. So I already did this for you one time. I will remind you, it remains green and happy.
It is in the front of your budget books as well.
Yeah, we gave you an extra copy. So it remains good news, right? So just to remind you, and for the sake of anybody in the community who wants to watch, we spent a lot of time, the funding formulas for schools is 100% dependent on the information we give them. So how many kids do we have? How many teachers, how many ed techs, how many secretaries, how many years of experience do those people have? What kind of degree do they have? If we miss 10 teachers that they have a master's degree and we send them as bachelors, they give us less money. Because they know that a teacher with a master's degree costs more than a teacher with a bachelor's degree. If we send them 10 teachers who have 5 years of experience, but in reality they have 10, they give us less money because they know that teacher with 5 years of experience costs less. So we spent a lot of time this summer correcting the data we had for our teachers. We spent a huge amount of time this fall putting together the alternate economic form, and the families in our community crushed it by filling it out because that had a huge impact on the number of students that we have noted as economically disadvantaged, which those kids, they send us more money. And I think all the work that Gabby with Rebecca have done to like make sure that we're reporting all of our special ed spending, because what's a little bit different for special ed is what we spend contributes to what we get for subsidy. So it's based on the number of kids we have, but it's also how much money we're spending. So we have to make sure that what we're sending them for that data is very clean data, and things have been allocated to the correct lines. It's what makes a school budget a nightmare. Like, you think we could can we just put one subline in, like, and then we just spend the money on whoever needs it? But you have to tell the state, how much money did you spend on subs in special ed resource at Turner Primary? How much money did you spend on subs for regular education at the high school? Like, all of that contributes to that. So we really have to break everything out so that they can see it. So the money we spend on special ed makes a big difference in terms of what we get for subsidy. So the highlight is, after all that good hard work, our subsidy is up $2.18 million from last year, which is awesome. Right? Like, it is the best news. Yeah, I mean, I almost cried. So all that hard work paid off, and it's really hard to know if it's gonna pay off because the formula is so complex. It's not like you can sit down and just do it yourself and then see. You really have to wait for them to crank the numbers. So that plays a huge role in what we think we're gonna be able to present to the community. So Gabby, do you wanna take over this party?
Absolutely. So those are tiny.
Yeah.
Luckily, you are provided that in your budget book as well. So if you flip to the revenue section, it's going to be the second page in the revenue section. No matter what you do to that screen, I don't think you're gonna be able to read it. So
Yeah, I agree.
I think following along in your book is gonna be the best bet. So starting at the top, the interest earned. Last year, we increased the interest from 5,000 to 10,000 because the interest rate that we're getting at Androscoggin Bank was raised from 0.45% to 0.85%. This year, I'm confident that we'll be able to increase it further to $25,000. That's still on the conservative side because interest can shift at any time. This year, we've also added in the gas tax refund. Up until fiscal year 23, we had not been requesting the gas tax refund from the state. What that is a cost per gallon that we purchase from predominantly Jimmy's because it's right here. But any outside gas station that we purchase gas from, we have to submit every single receipt and we can get 30 cents a gallon back. So we've added in a line, and I actually Carrie and I were talking about it this morning. I'm going to increase that a bit more based on how much we received last year. Then we have the state agency client tuition. So this is money that the state provides us based on services that we provide to students who are wards of the state. It's based on a 3-year average. It fluctuates. What we get from the state is based on what we spend on these students. So if we don't spend as much, then we won't get as much back. So it offsets it, but looking at the numbers, we think that 80,000 is a fair number. The miscellaneous income, it fluctuates, revenue, it fluctuates as well. This can be from workers' compensation rebates. It can be from funds received from the state to cover costs requesting student records, unclaimed property funds, such as uncashed checks from years before. This year, we received, I think, $275 from random outstanding things that we wrote in and claimed. Then we come to the unencumbered balance carried forward. So first, you'll see a new line added in, the state support for out-of-district tuition. This is based on what Carrie had talked to earlier with the Margaret Murphy program at Green Central School. So since it's a new program and it's establishing a great opportunity for students to stay local, but still get the services they need, the state has agreed to fund, I believe it's half. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yes.
Yeah, half of what our expenses are. So we anticipate our expenses to be at around $500,000 for this year. And the state has offered $250,000 to offset that. But based on the timeline of when these services, we have to provide progress reports, we expect to probably receive $187,500 this fiscal year. Since we budgeted for that money, we are proposing to carry that forward to offset the increased expenses for next year. The other side of that is if the state decides that we have to set up a separate fund for this, we'll move expenses out of our general budget from this year into that fund. We'll still be able to carry this money forward to offset the expenses. We are also proposing to carry forward $555,000 from the unencumbered balance, the unencumbered reserve funds to offset the overall budget impacts to the towns. This is the same amount that was carried forward for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 22. With our current fiscal year, we did propose to carry forward some additional funds, but those were for specific purposes that we didn't spend, I think, in fiscal year 22 or 23. Next up is the state subsidy. So this, and your revenue sheet does show what we're proposing for fiscal year 25 versus what our current budget is. And you can see there that the state subsidy was increased by $2.1 million. So that's a great amount of money and we're grateful for that. And this is determined by that lovely formula that Carrie was just talking about, the ED279. In order to receive those funds, we also have to contribute, or the towns have to have an essential program and services local assessment of $8.4 million. So that also increased, but not as significant amount as the state portion. The local only debt service, this is related to the Green and Trip renovations and additions, also the Leeds and Turner parking improvements. This proposed budget, fiscal year 25, will be the final payment on this bond. So that, the reduction in that is based on the interest. And then finally, the local additional funds are the funds that we're requesting that are above the essential programs and services that's outlined in the ED279. This is so the district, can fulfill all of the educational needs throughout what is needed at all of our schools. I'm gonna just jump down to the adult ed local assessment as well. That's $176,460. That has remained the same for the last 2 fiscal years. It increased back in fiscal year 21, I believe, from 164,000. So it's stayed consistent for a number of years. So with all of that in mind, our total general budget is at $35,112,277, which is an increase of $2,618,000 or 8.06%.
You rounded it up.
You rounded it up.
I rounded it?
You didn't.
Touch those.
No.
numbers.
Which turns out to be an increase to the local share.
Get your ads as you drive.
Of $382,815 or 2.53%, which is significantly lower.
Yes,
Than
I
last
remember
year.
Last year.
It was over 13%, I believe,
that.
last year. So,
That's why the pictures, that's why I picked the play picture. I'm so excited. Did anybody go with that? So, okay, so I think what we'd like to do now is, last thing is the budget website. There's nothing on it right now, but as of next, so by tomorrow morning, we wanted to make sure, we'll post everything the next day. of all the materials, similar to last year, if you recall. There will also be a form for people to submit questions. If they have, if I get those questions, I'll report them out to you for the information that people have asked about. But all that will be, posted here. As soon as it's there tomorrow, I'll email the community, make sure that the town manager share for the selectmen. All that information will be available for people. So we'll update each week as we go through this process. Okay, so now it is an opportunity for directors and principals to just do a quick share of the executive summaries. In your books is the first page of each warrant article. And that's all we're gonna do is that summary of those executive pages. It gives you an overview of what you're gonna see when we go warrant article by warrant article. Before I turn this over, does anybody have any questions? So we're just gonna go in the order of the warrant articles. So the very first one and the biggest one is regular instruction. So I believe that's gonna be Evan, Jana, and Doug, right? Okay.
So good evening. As far as our executive summary, Superintendent Med took care of about 2/3 of it. And as you can see, in your booklet, Turner Primary requested the additional grade 2 teacher due to larger class sizes. TES, we requested a full-time dean of students, but rather than add these into the budget, we've taken a good hard collaborative look at numbers throughout each of our schools in the district, and we're actually transferring 2 of those positions from Green Central School, one to TPS, one to TES, to handle those requests. I'd like to point out also that neither Leeds nor Green had any additional budget requests this year. And as Superintendent Med mentioned earlier, the instructional coach position at TPS has come off of the ESSER grant funding in the regular ed budget, and the currently unfilled, sorry, Jan, LCS instructional coach position has been moved into the Title I grant. And wrapping up the elementary executive summary, our software requests are consistent with what they have been previous years, including Reading A to Z, eSpark, IXL, Lexia, and Zern. The money from those subscriptions, and I should note that some of them had a significant cost increase from last year, like some shocking. But rather than add those in, we've included those in the per pupil allocations, which rather than increase the budget to pay for those, we reduce the money we have available to purchase classroom supplies. So it's a little challenging there because previously most of the software had been paid for using grant funds. It's a little bit of a revamp for that. So that is our elementary executive summary.
Minimal, increase at the middle school, so for 5,000 for student supplies. I think I remember last year we had a big bump in our, incoming 7th grade, and I did not budget for additional supplies last year because we had a surplus of things we had ordered, especially with like the ESSER fund. Yes.
I'm not sure how good that is, but I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Maybe one, but yeah.
So I don't know if we need to have them come forward to make, especially for this presentation with a.
Maybe use the podium. This one.
Okay, start over. Just a minimal increase at the middle school, a little over $5,000, asking for additional funding for student supplies. We had an increase of students in our incoming 7th grade class. It'll be moving into our 8th grade class that I did not put in the budget last year because we had additional, a surplus of supplies that we had ordered with some ESSER funds. But most of those are consumable and used throughout the year, and so we need to sort of get back on track. And then, as you know, with everything else, the cost of supplies has increased, and so our per pupil allocation for students went from $73 to $80 per student, and that aligns with the K-6 elementary per pupil allocation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
the high school portion of warrant article one, you'll notice it represents, maintenance of current program offerings, so it's, we haven't added any additional programming. Ms. Med pointed out that there is a reduction in, computer equipment because we will not be purchasing, ninth grade Chromebooks that was purchased with MLTI funds. You will, notice when you look line by line, an increase in supplies for family and consumer science. This represents an increase in the cost of food for a food science class. That's exactly where it goes to the grocery store. Additionally, there's an increase in the science and technology repairs and maintenance line. This increase, represents, microscope repair and maintenance. It historically has been budgeted for. It has been done since COVID, so it's time to put it back in there so they get their annual, maintenance on our microscopes. Additionally, you will notice that there's an increase of $6,000 in contracted services. This is not a new service. This is the increased share of the district portion of the JMG program, Jobs for Maine Grads. This is year 3 of 4, in which we are gradually increasing our contribution to $27,000 in the 25-26 year. The warrant article also includes anticipated funds for potential increases to stipends. So you can see those, there are placeholder numbers in there.
Rebecca? Warrant article 2.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Drysdale, I'm the Director of Special Education here in the district.
A little bit
Can you speak
louder.
up?
Oh, certainly. I'm standing behind a podium, half of my dinner, on my outfit this evening, so I'm kind of, cannot see. I'm a little worried, I was gonna have to stand over there to be able to present, so I'm much more confident now. All my clothes. Anyway, so I want to present tonight or this evening, the budget process that we go through in special education. It's a little different because we're not just in one school, we're in 6 schools and then multiple schools beyond that for students attending special purpose private programming. So what we do at the beginning of this process is in November and December, we plan budget meetings where we meet with building principals and special education staff. And then we discuss, most often it's the number of students that we have at that time. And then also looking at their level of needs for each of those students. And we look at that, like I said, within the district with our schools and then also in our out of district programs. And then from there, we develop the budget based on their input. And we also see what our needs are, what we observe throughout the year district-wide. As I've shared in my previous presentations, we do have an increased number of students that are identified for special education that's been steadily increasing over time. We also have an increase in the number of students qualifying for special education with disabilities related to behavior, hence the position that Superintendent Med talked about a little bit earlier. And then we have students that can remain with us until their 22nd birthday. And then we also have students coming to us who are already identified from child development services that already receive special education services. So as a result of all of this work, we have increases that Superintendent Med had talked about around tuition for special purpose private programming. Not only do we have the programs that our students go to and attend, but we also have our Margaret Murphy GCS program as well that we're factoring into the budget. It is at a reduced cost, but it is a cost that we have to the district. As part of that, students attending those schools, we are obligated to pay main care, what they call main care C costs, which are billable medical services that the schools bill the state gives the schools money for those services. And then we are billed by the state for 38% of that. That has been going up. Those costs have been going up over the last couple of years in increases of, we're hearing as directors through percentages, but also if you have more students in the schools, you also have higher C costs as well. So I did want to point those pieces out. We did, as Superintendent and Gabby had talked about, we had, because the state was pleased and helped endorse our Margaret Murphy program at GCS, hoping that would encourage other schools to do that as well. They had offered to pay half of the cost for this school year. We are hoping, as Gabby had talked about, using those costs to support some of the out-of-district tuition for the coming school year. And I've also asked, it doesn't hurt to ask if they would be willing to be able to give us additional money for next year as well. There was not a commitment for the state to do more than 1 year, but I certainly did ask if they would be able to support that, and I haven't heard yet. So we're waiting to see. Another piece of that is when the superintendent had talked about an educational technician for Leeds Central School. In our budget meeting at Leeds, we have students coming in from CBS that will be coming into kindergarten, and they will need a level of additional support. We do not have students transitioning to the middle school, so we have our group of students that will be remaining at Leeds and additional students coming in. So we will notice in the budget that we have added an Ed Tech 3 position due to the high severity of needs of the students coming in. We also have an increase of 3 additional education technicians at the high school. Those are between our transition support program and our functional support programs. Those were also determined at our budget meetings. The transition support program is essentially a program that services students with behavioral needs at the high school. And over the years, we've had more students entering that program and need a high level of support. Many of those students spend most of their day in the general education and special education settings with their peers, so they need additional support to be able to meet their goals on their plans. Along with, we are very proud of our community-based job training program within our functional support program. And so as more students are coming in from the middle school to the high school, and we have more students staying with us within that program, we need supervision out of the community. And in order to do those roles and responsibilities, both teaching in the transition support program and going out to the community, we are asking for Ed Tech 3s to be able to support that, as opposed to a 1 or a 2. At the high school, we also identified 2 additional ed techs as needs, but we had decided, Evan and I had a conversation, decided not to move forward with those at this time. But we would come back to the board next year if those are something that are a definite need and are required. We have this, I know in the previous year, we had requested in the part of a proposal is having additional days for the assistant director. So the assistant director last year went from 180 days to 195 days. And we had found over the summer that it wasn't enough. We're looking at the ongoing IEP meetings that are happening throughout the summer for our special students and special private schools. Also with the change in the restraint and seclusion laws, where we have more IEP meetings that we're having for students, that has also increased. And then we also had some feedback from our ed tech staff in terms of really looking for more training. So we really want to be able to have this time during the summer with ed techs to be able to support them and get them trained and ready to go for the school year to be able to meet our students' needs within the classrooms. So we're looking to increase the assistant director to full-time. That would be a year-round position. So you would see some of the changes in salaries and benefits in that line. The next piece that we're looking at is we are looking at our structures. And every few years we examine, okay, what are we doing? And, what's going well? And what are some things that we need to check and adjust? And through our budget meetings and meeting with our staff and our increased number of students, we were looking at our current, we have 6 special education leaders, 1 at each of the schools, and it's a stipend framework where they are working all day as special education teachers, and then they are supporting case managers in completing, creating paperwork and reviewing paperwork. And they are seen as special education experts at each of the schools. And so with our increased number of students and responsibilities, along with what's happening with our school psychologist, who is doing an enormous amount of evaluations for students, we are looking at kind of pulling back on her evaluations to be able to transfer potentially classroom observations and academic evaluations to another position. And so through this process, we really talked about, is it time to really looking at several full-time leaders across the district to be able to support our case managers, to support our service providers, and then to also help with our school psychologists to be able to do some of those evaluations and potentially put these positions, also be administrators at IEP meetings to a degree where they would be local educational agency representatives. So if funding was needed, that they would be able to allocate those funds as well. And that would free up the principals to be able to do other responsibilities that they have as well. So part of this is we're looking at a potentially multi-year phase to phase this in. So the first year, as Carrie had talked about, we are looking at taking some positions that we already have available that are unfilled as teaching positions and changing those roles from a special education teacher to a full-time special education team leader, either in a school or among two schools that we were looking at. So at the high school, we have a full-time resource teacher position that has been vacant this school year. It is a need, but when talking with the team about this idea in terms of having a full-time leader, they were really interested in shifting that position to a full-time leader position and keeping the rest of the teaching positions that they have. So that would replace a position that's already there, but it would be someone that would be full-time to be available to attend IEP meetings, review paperwork, do evaluations, and really work closely with our new administrative secretaries. So the other position, so that was one that we had. Another one was also working with Green Central School and the vacant position that Carrie had talked about. And we're thinking of moving that position to Turner and relabeling that to the leader position and having that person be between Turner Primary and Turner Elementary as a full-time person doing the same roles that they would do at the high school, but they would be doing it between those two schools. And then Jana and I, found a creative solution at the middle school, because the middle school is unique, even though they're there for 2 years. We also, it would be hard to really share with a number of students share with either a Turner Elementary School or to share with the high school. So we have 2 vacant positions at this point at Turner, Tripp Middle School. And so we're going to have one of those positions, specifically the behavior support program position, where we would have them do leadership roles and responsibilities and some case management. So that would be kind of more of a different position that we'd be working in, but would certainly be able to dedicate more time to the leadership role, with the oversight of we have several strong in-techs, be able to work with our kiddos, with behavioral needs. So at that point, now what you're probably thinking, what's happening at Green and Leeds? So for Green and Leeds, we were considering adding a position, but at the same time, we also want to be really mindful of the budgetary process. We're not quite sure, we're not quite sure what's going to happen with CDS. And would there potentially be some CDS funding that we could use for a leader position over at Green and Leeds? So at this point, that's what we're kind of starting off where I began in this area. But what we would look at is kind of a 2-year rollout. So we'd roll it out next year with 3 full-time leaders. And then the following year, we would have a 4th full-time leader that will be putting into the budget for green and leads. In the meantime, myself and the assistant director, I've been the leader over at green, which has been amazing. But then it's also been difficult to do some of the responsibilities that I have as well. But I would work closely with the assistant principal over there, and our leader at Leeds has agreed to stay another year in that role to be able to do some dual case management and some leadership responsibilities. So that I feel like, I know that proposal is confusing, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, because it's been a lot of moving parts, and I think short of putting everything on a board and drawing lines, that's as far as we have done with that piece. But we're hoping that these leaders will also, certainly at the elementary level, will be another step towards supporting our kiddos if and when we're responsible for 3 and 4-year-olds. So they potentially, we're trying to build that in, that capacity to do some case management with them as well. One thing that we are looking at, as well as adding 8 summer days to the full-time leader position. So that will be a little bit, in the bottom of that proposal will be a little bit of a cost increase to that. And that would align with our administrative secretaries that also have 8 summer days. So as we're looking at, the assistant director has summer responsibilities, our leaders would have summer responsibilities as well in closing out the school year, preparing for the new school year, and really capturing our new kiddos coming in. The last piece, I will stop. I know I'm going on and on. I've been talking about this for months. The last piece of this is looking at a BCBA, as we were talking about, the board certified behavior analyst, to be able to meet the needs of our student staff and working with our families, with students that have behaviors, as they have been, we have students that have increased and related to those disabilities.
Very thorough executive summary.
Yes.
Other instruction? Want to go upstairs?
Such a long commute.
Guys, let's do the dynamic duo and move on.
For other instruction, co-curriculars and athletics, the proposed budget maintains the current co-curricular offerings at TRIP. The athletic portion also maintains the current offerings. It is a decrease from last year, but I feel like it was worth noting. We had added an increase because we purchased the football uniforms, if you remember. And so it's a decrease, but it's still higher than it had been years prior to that, because we're trying to create equity in purchasing of uniforms and equipment to get us caught up. And so there's, we had also ordered field hockey goals. And so we have one field that we share for soccer and football. And so there's often 5 practices a night on there. And so we put in 2 portable soccer goals so that we could ideally run some of the soccer practices at an off location. Field hockey uniforms and basketball uniforms, we try and do sort of like a rotation, but just from the increase of students and the number of students that are participating in athletics, we need to purchase additional. Just think of it as less than it was last year.
Much like the middle school, the co-curricular offerings at the high school remain the same. Additionally, the proposed budget maintains our current athletic offerings as well. There is an increase, as Ms. Med pointed out, to include a full-time athletic trainer as a result of not being able to contract with an outside agency as we've been doing for a while. There's also a slight increase in the requested funds for football supplies and equipment, and this is entirely due to the increased cost of replacement pads and helmets. The warrant article also includes negotiated stipend increases, so of the overall increase to the warrant article, the two major drivers of that are going to be the athletic trainer and the increases to stipends. Those are gonna be the two big ones.
Okay, for student staff support, I'm gonna have Wally do that. Most of that budget, most of the stuff in there is related to technology, but that includes technology, nursing, guidance, library.
Yeah, Walter Morris, Tech Director. Yeah, as Carrie mentioned, Superintendent Med. As she mentioned, a lot of these bullet points have to do with technology, so here I am. First and foremost, the student safety monitoring software, Lightspeed, you might remember that from last year's budget. We were able to cover that last year with some grant funding. I believe it was out of ESSER. That's going away. So that's transitioning to the budget. Additionally, there's Google licensing. Everything we use, as some of you may know with your emails, is Google. Years ago, Google shuffled their structure around so that we started having to pay for the product. There was an LMS grant that covered that, I think, the last 3 years. That's again going away, not being renewed, so transferring to our budget. Secondly, there's the cyber liability coverage from our insurance provider. There's guidance saying that there's likely going to be a requirement for what's considered managed detection and response for our antivirus. So the increased move from what our current solution is to the managed version is in there as well. An increase in employee training, it's a significant portion, but historically we haven't really invested very well in our technology staff and growing their skill set. So that's a large portion. Supply lines, while there was a decrease, I believe the superintendent mentioned, there was also kind of some shuffling, I feel like is a better maybe term of that. And so like given one-to-one, a lot of that stuff was purchased with COVID money. I noticed this year that there were some items that I missed in last year, specifically headphones, which are more expensive. So that's been adjusted. And then I'm trying to establish a cycle for faculty hardware so that we don't have this kind of heartbeat replacement cycle. And so you'll see an increase related to that. And the last bullet point, I believe, was for resource, so.
Yeah, so we just reduced the per pupil amount for library from 21 to 19, and that was part of sort of that $30,000 general reduction that each school made. Systems admin. Okay. So you'll notice an increase in the recording stipend for board meetings. I think we can talk about, we may not need to do that if we stick with the OWL because the setup is a lot less than what we were anticipating with all the microphones and everything. But we, at the point at which we were doing this, we put that in to account for that amount of money. We've increased our legal fees, 10,000 to reflect actual expenses. The phone system has decreased a lot. Wally put a huge effort into getting those phones replaced last year. It's been a significant decrease across the district. Travel reimbursement, for me to go to one conference, there was no money for a hotel. Business supplies are up just because of costs, and dues and fees in terms of allowing for in the business office, membership to the Maine Association of Business Offices. So pretty minimal amount of money. The rest of it really is reflected in salaries and benefits. School administration, I'll do that one as well. That's those school administration are all the administrators that are in the schools. Really, it's just salaries and benefits. We had to increase translation services at Green, and that translation services is for families. So if a family is non-English speaking, we need to make sure that we provide services throughout. And then the software we use Frontline for professional growth. So we've been using Frontline for a long time for subs and sort of doing that. We've now started to increase our use of all the other parts of Frontline that we just weren't taking advantage of. So 2 years ago, before I got here, started using Frontline for the teacher evaluation process. We kind of brought that online just for a little bit. Now it's fully online. That's the whole evaluation process is happening through that. So that you'll see that increase there. We're also using Frontline, but I think this increase was in last year's budget was for time and attendance.
No, time and attendance was in ESSER grants for this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For fiscal year 25, I
So
believe it's
next
going
year.
to regular instruction.
Okay, so what you see in there is that, but the vast majority of that is salaries and benefits, no additional positions, anything like that. Yeah, transportation.
Oh, no, it's not my time to the work thing. So, I know that. Yeah.
So for the proposed budget for, next year's an increase. Some of the increases came from bus driver salaries that were given this year. There was a decrease in overtime salary, substitute, and out-of-district budget lines to reflect the average, from the last 3 years' expenses. The increase in driver benefits line and workers' compensation lines, which is, went up directly because of the increase in salaries. There was a decrease in auto insurance, $5,731 or 10.85% to reflect the premium increase on the actual expense for fiscal year 24. The amount included a credit from the Easy to Earn plan. So a questionnaire that promotes safety and gave us a discount. There's an increase in gasoline charges of 40%. The actual number of gallons used in fiscal year 23 at a fluctuating rate and mostly purchased from Jimmy's General Store. Price of gas is going on. Decrease in tires of $12,000 or 28.57%, based on the last 3-year average of expenses on this line. Basically, it's just, we've been using more buses, so less miles, less we have to replace every year. Decrease in equipment on the other of $14,604. The radio system that we have is being paid off. The next one was a mistake on the interest. The wrong formula was put in, but there was a increase in transportation vehicles, principal of $46,870, and the interest is supposed to be $2,461, 22%. So numbers, mistake there.
That'll be corrected for next week.
This is for a proposal of 2 new 77 passenger buses and 2 new 14 passenger vans through a 5-year purchase. We have a lot of vans and quite a few buses that are starting to get up in mileage and years. And, with the increase in special education, more transportation is needed with the vans. So we're gonna have to start looking at really replacing and adding in more vans going forward. There's an increase in CT bus driver salaries of $9,972 or 111%. To include 2 individuals making 1 midday run. This allows for the overtime charges to be reduced by splitting it between 2 people instead of just having 1. There's increase in van driver hourly rate to be competitive with other area businesses and districts. And then part of the active contract.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dave Coburn, Facilities, warrant Article 9, Facilities. Proposed budget warrant 9, Facilities, there's an increase of $217,000, $998. Going up 5.51%. There's a decrease in the district-wide telephone charges, an upgrade to Cope Central. We thank Wally for that. He did a great job on that. Decrease in custodial substitute salaries by $37,000. Also, we proposed an unassigned custodial position to kind of offset some of that with to take kind of, when we're missing people on the second shift, and the added activities that we have, the unassigned position will help out, and I'll explain that more. Increased property insurance of $9,800, which is pretty much 20% increase, above our actual facility 24, for facilities. We have a reduction in the electricity budget due to the contract, kilowatt hours. It's more online of what we're expecting coming up in 25. So there'll be a reduction for that. As far as an increase with the building and grounds for mining their capital projects, TPS, we have $50,250 for water supply, basically for the holding tanks here. The setup we have now is we have one holding tank for fire suppression system, and we need an actual holding tank for the fire suppression system and the water itself, the domestic water. So that's in the budget. At TES, emergency lights, there's an increase of $13,250. Emergency lights in the kitchen, security cameras, and we need door repairs or replacements. A lot of the doors, when we run our fire exits, are not operating properly, and we need to bring those up to code. At TMS, we have painting, cameras, and also asbestos abatement that we're planning on doing. And also at all of those locations, we're adding Knox boxes, which are costly, but emergency services, we're gonna try to help them out with having those Knox boxes. At LAHS, there's a reduction of $106,000. That's basically, we did a bunch of projects at Levitt this year. And we're hoping to fill those in with capital projects moving forward through EEI. A decrease in the maintenance agreements of $20,877 for Siemens contracts not being needed. Increase in fuel expenses district-wide, including propane, oil, wood chips to reflect the actual amount used, and the estimated increase in the year, fiscal year 25. An increase to maintenance substitutes, to include wood chip boiler service, add additional plowing, summer maintenance, spring cleaning, and painting needed district-wide. As far as new proposals, the first one is Master Library Facility Software. This software will help us with our district-wide facility use. It also has work orders with it, inventory management, asset management, and also preventative maintenance schedules. So basically, the proposal will help us know the equipment we have, also do preventative maintenance. It'll be on a schedule and timing, and we'll have more of an inventory of how often we change belts and we do our fixtures, and it'll help us get up to speed, and make us more efficient. Second proposal would be the district-wide unassigned custodian. An unassigned custodian would be to cover the gaps that we have for sick time, vacation time, and then custodial call-outs. As we move on, especially in the winter time, we have programs, basketball programs and events in every school. So the buildings are being used, they're busier. So in a lot of times, our custodians have zones that they clean. This would help with kind of sending guys in a position to help out with the other activities that happen after hours, and also filling positions. We don't have the staff there. And then the last one would be head custodian position at each school. The head custodian would be responsible for training staff, creating schedules, planning the maintenance, contractor visits, making repairs, and then basically setting up for the special events, because every day we have events. And that head custodian would train our staff, and they also test life safety systems. They would basically be a building manager. It would help with the staff with creating better communication, ensuring safety, monthly inspections, and just making things run more efficiently in each building. Any questions?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is warrant article 10, or debt service. I did talk about this during the revenue portion of our presentation. This is specific to just that one loan for the green and trip renovations and additions to Leeds and Turner parking improvements. There are a number of other loans district-wide. I can talk about some of them. We have the Siemens Energy Performance Contract, a Siemens Phase 2 project, which included a chiller replacement and wood chip bunker installation at Levitt, a ventilator replacement and gym and cafe ventilation upgrade at Turner Elementary, and kitchen equipment at Tripp. There's also an athletic field renovation loan, and then school buses and other maintenance vehicles. But the only expense that's actually considered a debt service is that one loan, and that will be finished after fiscal year 25. So that's very exciting. There's a decrease because it's, you know, you're reducing the total amount owed, the interest goes down. Any questions on that one? Then we're gonna I'm gonna stay and we're gonna talk about warrant article 11, other expenditures. So this warrant is specifically used to help offset the expenses related to both food services and adult education. Due to the changes in how student lunches and now breakfasts are funded, food service does not need to request any additional funding. But the adult education program does still need some assistance, and we're maintaining the same request for fiscal year 25 as our current fiscal year. So there is no increase. It's maintaining the $63,880. Questions on that one?
Dave Roberts, Food Service Director. As Gabby mentioned, the state and federal are continuing to fund breakfast and lunch, so that puts us in a period of rapid growth. I mentioned in my article here at the end of the first paragraph that we're seeing participation rates at all-time highs, 80% and approaching 80% for lunch, and 65% at breakfast. So the revenues are going up at the same time. It's always a challenge to project expenses. And when I look at that year-over-year increase, it kind of makes me startle a little bit, but that's increased based on what we projected we would spend this year. But we're spending more this year because we're feeding a lot more. So the year-over-year increase is not exactly that high. We're seeing higher food costs, as been mentioned already. The increasing student participation rates are the biggest driver in increased expenses. We're having to staff more people as well. But we're also accruing revenues at a rapid rate. In fact, revenues are continuing to outpace expenses, which is good news. The other point I want to make clear too is that our operating expenses do not hit the general fund, as we talked about before. Our expenses are being paid for by the increase in revenues. Yes, we've added some hours to different positions to accommodate the increased workload. We've increased expenditures on supplies. We've improved equipment, replaced and upgraded equipment. We've got some bid processes going on now for some bigger projects in paragraph 2 there. As we mentioned, with the way the funding is in place for future years, we hope it continues this way. We anticipate maintaining high rates of participation. So we're staffing accordingly. A couple of explanatory paragraphs towards the end here that the increases in salaries really is based on increasing hours in some positions, and of course, increasing hourly rates based on collective bargaining agreements. I'll just conclude here with the total budget impact. We're not going to request a subsidy at all. That's our whole year. We're not doing that. We expect to cover all of our expenses by incoming revenues or our cash balance as well. Thank you.
Almost there, right?
I'm Brian Reed, Vice Director for Adult Community Education. If you have not had an opportunity, we have a very robust enrichment program. A couple highlights. We offered a beekeeping class this year that was so successful, we've had to offer it an additional 3 times, and we're probably going to do it again. I understand it's a great opportunity. I just finalized plans today for a summer sewing program for kids. So, and adding that to our already robust athletic camps that we have in all summer. And just to remind you that enrichment does not require any tax dollars. It's fully self-supporting, and it's just a great program. So if you haven't taken advantage of it, I encourage you to look into it. On the academic side, I should tell you, our enrollment has doubled since the pandemic. We have, as if you ever come by central office, you'll find there are students in virtually every room but Ms. Med's office. But I think that's because she keeps it locked, otherwise they'd probably be there. But we have some great programs that have gone on. We have partnered with CMCC to offer a college transition program on campus. Right now, I believe we have 9 students in that program who are preparing for their next step of education. We also are partnering with our other hub programs, Lewiston, Auburn, Oxford Hills, Mechanic Falls, and Poland, to offer an applied workplace technology program. This offers anybody IC3 certification, a Microsoft Office Suite certification, as well as a State of Maine Work Ready certification. And we're finally offering, we've partnered with Clover Manor and continuing to offer pay as you learn CNA training. Well, we've had 2 students who've gone through the program, so we're really excited about this. I'd love to see those numbers go up. The more workforce preparation we can offer, I think the better. We also have had some real success with our college and career access coordinator. Their job is to act as a liaison between area adult educations and the colleges and universities in Maine. She's providing access to tutoring as well as referring students back to adult education for additional help that they might need. And finally, we've enrolled this year 5 students in College for Me, which is a free college class program for any adult education student who wants to try college out. The program pays for their books, for their tuition, and we've had, last year we enrolled 3, this year we're up to 5, so we're really excited about this. So thank you very much for your support.
Last one, reserve accounts. Bring it home, get it.
All right, so I did talk a little bit about the unallocated fund balance, again, in the revenue presentation. The state requires or recommends that you only keep a 9% balance in your unreserved. So when I say 9%, 9% of your current budget or last year's budget, which is significantly less than what we presently have based on not expending all of our budgeted funds in prior years. So it's built up over the years. We're supposed to come up with a plan on how to spend that back down. So we're only at 9%. You have 3 years to come up with a plan. Last year, we carried forward more than the 555,000 that we had in previous years. We also established and funded other reserve accounts. We established a technology reserve account, and we also funded the capital repair reserve account. So we also really didn't have a good grasp on what our unallocated fund balance was because our audit really just kind of started in December when we were just starting this process. This year, again, we don't know what our unallocated fund balance is because our audit is still ongoing. We hope to have it done in the next few weeks, so I'm not all that hopeful based on the amount of work I've been doing with them just this week. Regardless, we have a healthy fund balance. We need to start working towards what needs to happen. We also know that we have been working with EEI on establishing a capital reserve plan, or I'm sorry, a capital plan on repairs and maintenance, upgrades, things that have to happen, which are quite extensive throughout the district. So this year, we're first proposing to establish and fund $200,000 towards a special education reserve fund. This will allow us to fund unanticipated increases in student needs. So as students are put into the special education program, we may need to bring in a new teacher or get additional supplies or items that are necessary to help these students succeed. This would only be unanticipated. You don't use these funds to offset finance or expenses that you know are going to be incurred during the year. In addition to that, we are recommending to establish and fund a regular instruction reserve fund with $100,000. Again, if there's an influx of students that we didn't know to anticipate and we have to add another teacher, instead of being able to move students or teachers around within the district based on decreases in one school and increases in another, this is a reserve that would help us take care of that without an unanticipated burden. Finally, we're proposing to increase or transfer $700,000 into the general capital repair fund. This would help us offset the expenses that we know are going to come with the repairs from working with EEI and potentially the wastewater treatment plant if necessary, instead of putting an additional burden on the towns. One other thing that we do think would be beneficial is to move the $200,000 that's presently in the wastewater treatment plant, chiller and wood chip capital reserve fund to the general repair fund. So the funds could still be used for those projects, but in addition to that, it could be used for any repair project. So it's not pigeonholing it to just those three things. We also are going to request that the voters grant authority to the board to expend the technology reserve fund. So we don't necessarily have to do that annually because it was done last year, but it's good to just bring it to everyone's attention that we have these reserve funds, and if the need arises, then the board can still approve expending the funds. Any questions? The end of the budget portion. Wow.
All right, so we're now going to move on to the public comment portion, but I will highlight it is specifically a public comment period about the budget. We will be having another typical public comment period that will be more general, similar to our regular public comment period we have every meeting. So this first public comment period is specifically about the budget. Is there anyone out there who would love to comment on the budget? Yes.
I would like to express my family's, oh, I'm sorry, I'd like to express my family's satisfaction for the precision machine technology programs where a cohort of LTC students take classes throughout the year at CMCC for dual credit. My son is learning hands-on work with manual and CNC mills and lathes, as well as doing food delivery. I want to congratulate you on offering an excellent program that challenges students and prepares them for a lucrative engineering career. My question is, and it might have been touched on, who is paying for this program? And I just want to know what the cost is. This includes in the LMTC. It seems to be a total of the LMTC students. Maybe we can touch on that later.
Yeah, we'll certainly take that comment and think about it. And you know, I don't have an answer for it right now. So, anyone else interested in speaking?
Michelle, please. And first off, I want to thank you guys for working so hard on this. We try to do what you can to save the taxpayers and the town's money. And I want to let you know that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way that each one of us could save this school a little bit of money. That takes place on November 5th. Thank you.
Anyone else interested in commenting on the budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll highlight that our next budget work session is on March 7th at 6 o'clock in the high school, at Levitt Area High School. We will continue on in detail with the beginning of the warrant articles. But thank you all very much. That concludes our budget work session, so feel free to come on back up.
I'm gonna let those guys go.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I Yeah, I'm moving up in the world.
Correct.
Those are the headlines.
All right, so, next item on the agenda is our minutes. So our first, or I shouldn't say our first, we should act on the 11th regular meeting minutes from February 8th. Does anyone have any comments or revisions to those minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. I do not have a report to provide tonight, so that is a simple one to move forward on, which will bring us to our second and more typical public comment period. I'll just reiterate a few things before we get started there, and that's that our board meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying out the official business of our schools. It's important to note that the meetings of the board are open to the public, however, they are not public forums. At each meeting of the board, time is allocated to provide opportunities for citizens and employees to express opinions and concerns related to the matters under consideration by the board. These comments shall be within the guidelines set forth in policy BEDH, public participation in board meetings. Copies of the policy are available here and on the district's website. I would like to highlight the following. The chair is responsible for recognizing all speakers. We ask that speakers identify themselves by sharing their name and town of residence. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes to express their views. Speakers should direct all comments to the board, specifically the board chair. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. This is not intended to be a conversation or a debate of issues. We know that school-related issues can be emotional, but we ask that civility is maintained. We will not permit profanity, gossip, defamatory comments, shouting at one another, or comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups. The board is faced with many important issues. For the sake of efficiency, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments. The board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. We certainly care about these concerns, but they are personnel matters which the board is not permitted to hear in public. If there are complaints against staff, these will be handled appropriately through our complaint policy KE. Just to reiterate, this is just a highlight of key points. Please refer to policy BEDH for a complete description. With that, do we have anyone wishing to speak? Go ahead. You don't have to, as long as you can project. Yeah.
Tomorrow kicks off Youth Art Month, so if you didn't know that, we're going into that. Levitt is representing at the Portland Museum of Art. We have one student's piece that I brought down and will be up and is on display for the entire month. Opening reception is next Saturday, which everybody's welcome to go to. But it's really awesome because we, as a state, have kindergarten through the 12th grade that's there, and Levitt has one piece. We also are representing at the MEA office in Augusta, and what they do is we're able to send one, and they mat and frame it. They hold it for a year, so it's on display, but then the child gets it back in that frame to keep. Levitt is also going to be the school representing Maine, and the only one that's going to nationals. So we have a student who has designed, it's a flagish banner, it's kind of ambiguous, but the theme this year was Dream and Art. And our school and our student, in collaboration with a couple others, is the only one that will be at the national convention in Minnesota. So it'll be on display that week from April 2nd to April 8th-ish, which is really cool because that's our kids there. But also Youth Art Month means that this is the month of dance and theater and music and visual arts. And so our one act will be competing next weekend as well. Hopefully they move on and then they get 1 week off and then they will go to states if they progress. We have, and my main reason for coming, Arts Gala night is the 13th and you're all invited to come. It's 5:30 to 7 at the high school. 1X, it does have, I believe, like a PG-13. It's not really intended for younger audiences. It is a 1-act play, so they tend to gear towards more of that. But 1X will be performing. Band and chorus will also have a piece, and as per normal, the entire first floor will be an art gallery. We will have artists in the building the 11th, 12th, and 13th. And then because the rest of the week is a little bit different, we're having them come in the next Monday through Wednesday. But that Wednesday will be performances in the auditorium only. They're going to be participating in dance. We have a couple of visual artists, but most of them coming in are music based. This year we have hula hooping and, like juggling. Supposedly somehow doing those at the same time, so we're gonna see how well that goes. But it's really awesome and inviting you to participate in whatever way that looks for you, at least March 13th, if you have the availability, 5:30 to 7. I will do a follow-up email to you about that one. But looking forward to it, because our kids have been working really hard over the year, and hopefully we can also celebrate some of that enthusiasm with our younger students throughout the district, not just in Turner, but we'll do that out there too. Do you have any questions about what's coming up?
Thank you very much.
Anyone else interested in speaking? Yes, please.
My name is Diane Rhines, I live in Williams, and I'm concerned about the books in the library, the sexual books, and there's quite a few of them, from what I've seen, a list of 50. I'll read off a few of these, promoting LGBTQ and trans, pride guide, and inspirational history, almost flying, rainbow warrior, pioneers of LGBTQ, freestyle, I am a wild seed, rethinking normal, trans, love, sex, romance, being jazz. All these titles are glorifying sex. And who doesn't want to be a pioneer or a hero? You know, it's promoting to children. So then I went looking like for books in the library that warn of future regrets of people who transition, because it's a real thing. So I tried different ways of typing it in: gender change regrets, transition regrets. And I kept coming up with the same thing: no items found. I think there should be a little balance there. I've heard that schools want to save lives with the books encouraging sexual freedom, but with just a little effort, you can find many testimonies of young adults who feel they were manipulated by the education and/or medical system to make these life-changing, often irreversible decisions. Now, 7 or 10 years later in life, they would like to have a child, but in many cases it's not possible because of what the surgeries they had. Even for some that still could become pregnant, they cannot nurse their babies because the breasts were removed. The suicide rates for these people is real, and it's increasing. And the state of Maine funds gender change surgery, but they do not fund detransitioning. You're on your own. So these people feel depressed and angry, and the support system that cheered them on and funded their choice are nowhere to be found. So I did also search for people who did regret transitioning. So I found a lot of videos and articles. I'll just read a couple of the titles. Hysterectomy, double mastectomy, and deep trans regret at 24, Katie Anderson. And I had heard, somebody told me this lady is going to be coming to Maine to speak, not at a school board meeting, but people need to see the other side.
Just a quick note, you're pretty much at your time, so if you could
Okay,
just
I'll
conclude.
just back up. I think these books might be good in the library. Irreversible Damage, Transgender Agenda, Abuse Regret in the Sex Change Industry by Alex B. Saratella. And I'll just stop here, but I think there should be some balance. It shouldn't be all one way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
Crystal Nicholas Green. I support the amendments proposed by Director Anthony Shostak to policy IJJ. These amendments align policy IJJ with federally mandated CIPA, Children's Internet Protection Act. Yes, our federal government, at least ostensibly, seeks to protect vulnerable children from sexualized content and sexualized predators exploiting children. These amendments not only align policy IJJ with SIPA, but also with IJNDBR, student computer internet use, JICA, student dress code, KCD, public gifts, donations to the school, and KHC, distribution of non-school materials. In these policies, the board is comfortable policing sexualized content. Without the safeguards of these proposed amendments, I am concerned about student safety in school libraries that proudly violate SIPA. Why is it acceptable for schools to expose their child to content in a book that they are barred from consuming on their school computer? Recently, I learned of a book in our school that features information about the ins and outs of anal sex. This was an inclusive to-do list for the aforementioned activity, and in no way was just referring to the anuses of marginalized groups, but all rectums everywhere. Included are directions for arriving at a squeaky clean anal passage because, and I quote, "Who is not sexy?" I was just curious if district parents know that this book encourages your teen to use laxatives to void and douches to cleanse for maximum sexiness and readiness. So do we get our medical sponsor to sign off on this stuff? What about the American Academy of Pediatrics? A study from Live Science found that of 130 teens experiencing anal sex, almost none had a favorable experience. Most engage in this activity due to perceived pressure from the form. Now that rings a bell. Didn't we used to have a book in our library that was chosen because it fit selection criteria and was removed because it did not? Yes, that was the book that said porn was a fun, sugary treat and bade kids to research their favorite porn star. Notice favorite porn star, thus encouraging porn consumption. And who cares about the American Academy of Pediatrics anyway? Sex product retailers such as Erica Moan, owner of Oh Joy Sex Toys, submit their books to publishers purely disinterestedly. Your kid is just their next market, whether you call it exploitation or business as usual. Though to the untrained eye, this may appear as product placement and a wild conflict of interest, rest assured that retailers selling sexy products to your kids in library materials have been vetted by our good friend, Policy IJJ. So don't forget, who is not sexy.
Thank you very much. Anyone else interested in speaking?
When child leaves, who is considered an expert? Someone who can ground up, fit to finish the best muscle cars of the day that 25 years later looks just as nice as the day it rolled out of my paint shop. Is that person an expert? Someone that can take bare land from concrete to carpet, move in ready. Is that person an expert? What about someone who builds from bare steel, Benz, Wells, race cars, 6 championships, 85 wins, title holder at 2 tracks of most wins and championships in their respectful division? Is that person an expert? With these 2 hands, every aspect of every bit of them jobs. Most people struggle to perfect just one, but why would you listen to me? Eye rolls, I see it. I've only raised a graduate of this school who is now 26 years old. I think I'm pretty well perceived dad. Besides, I'm only asking to keep children safe by keeping sexually explicit content out of the hands of minors at a publicly funded school, keeping all children safe. Not trying to give special privileges to obtain adult content to a certain group. Everything written says it harms children. What's seen and read can be undone. Exposure without meaningful consent is wrong, and one would say image-based abuse. You could not print pages in these books and wear them on a t-shirt in this school. You cannot look them up on the school computer. I could not bring it in for any advertising. Not to mention, per policy, staff isn't even supposed to indulge any way, shape, or form in this area. Maine School Board handbook says all such policies must be viewed in light of their effect on all students, not just some, all students. If you see a child run into the street, whether or not traffic was coming, would you run after that child, or would you look to see if his parents were there? I would run after that child.
And I wouldn't let anyone who puts and keeps or fights to keep sexually explicit content in the hands of minors babysit my kids.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking?
Mr. Belanger, agree? When I was growing up, there were magazines on the racks that had a paper band strapped around them so that children couldn't see the models that were exposing various body parts. Those magazines were simply showing women at different levels of nudity, Playboy, for example. The books that we're talking about here are now available, go way beyond that, showing full nudity and explaining different ways of sexual intercourse. We're here tonight to show our disapproval of these books and our concern for the children in the schools. And we're not only concerned about the children, but also the staff that are affected by these policies. There was a wise man whose ministry centered on his love for all people. When it concerned children, he knew that the decisions and actions that the adults made affect both of them. He said, whoever causes one of these little children to stumble, it would be better for that person to hang a millstone around his neck and jump into the sea. All these policies can have consequences for both the staff and the children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Belanger in Green, Maine. When I was a kid in elementary and junior high school, I had no interest in boys, especially sexually. I never thought there might be something wrong with me or different about me. I was just living a normal life of a 10 to 15-year-old girl. There were no books or adults teaching me that I may want to look into having a relationship with another female. I was just young and uninterested in having a boyfriend, that's it. But today, with all these books and teachings and graphic diagrams telling our children that maybe, just maybe, you would prefer a relationship with someone of the same sex as yourself, I never in a million years would have even given that a thought. But giving children of today that thought is what's causing the stress, confusion, depression, and mental health issues. Questioning themselves about who they are, or what the adults think that they are, or what a book tells them that they are. That if I, at that time in my life, didn't like boys, then there was something wrong with me. These books and lessons from adults are destroying our children, their emotions, their identity. I assure you, there is nothing wrong with me. I was young, kids of today are young, just like we were. Only these books and adults are pushing them and guiding them on the wrong path. So please, I ask you to protect our children and keep these books and lessons out of our schools. They will know in their own time who they really are.
Thank you. Yes.
Christine Duplessis, leads Supervision District. It's a parent's fundamental right to guide the upbringing and provide the care for their child. That is impossible if they are not a primary stakeholder in their kid's education. Parents want and are entitled to choice. It's their duty by law to protect their child who is incapable of obtaining informed consent. We need policy IJJ selection of educational materials to make sure parents' fundamental rights are being satisfied. We also need to take MSMA recommendation of protecting the district from lobbying efforts, so this board must have the proper oversight over all material and content coming into this district. Chairman, board directors, and superintendent Med, thank you for your time and effort. Going forward is upon us to make sure civility is paramount, so you are able to hear our concerns and solutions clearly. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Moving on, we are getting into communications, of which I have none. Superintendent.
Yep, one resignation to report, Stephen Mackey, Trip Middle School Ed Tech 3. And then new hires, Cheyenne Bowles, transportation specialist, so now both specialist positions are filled in transportation. And Carol Turner Primary School Food Service Assistant. And that means that food service is completely staffed.
Okay,
First time.
very good. Adjustments to the agenda tonight. There are a few items highlighted in red, particularly the executive session added in 11.6. Obviously, Assistant Superintendent Gillis is not with us tonight, so her report will be scratched. But we shall move on to committee reports. And we'll start off with the Finance Committee, Crystal.
Thank goodness we did not meet tonight. Missed, thank goodness I didn't. But our next meeting is March 21st at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Not 5:30.
Thank you very much.
5, Peter. Okay. Right. Oh.
Our next report is from the Plant Transportation Building Committee.
So that's very exciting.
It was a great meeting.
I didn't get.
Just.
We're gonna have Kyle report out on this, right?
You guys mind?
Oh, just like the vote.
So I met tonight. It was a good group. So we talked about, actually, we have some good news. There's some ESSER funds still available for, from the COVID money. That we have to spend by September 24th, which we'll lose if we don't spend it. So we are looking at doing some outdoor learning classrooms, which is tied into the ESSER funds, which is some structures that are being installed that are gonna be roughly just under $200,000 that we'll get, and it's 100% paid for by those funds. So it's gonna be a neat area to be able to be provided around the campuses. Not all the schools are gonna get it, but I know the high school opted out. They have some other ideas that they might be doing with some other items, I guess, right?
They were gonna do some summer learning and some other projects.
Okay.
But I think each of the elementary schools.
And the middle school.
Yeah. So that's, will be kind of a neat area for the students. Moving on, we discussed the generators, and there's been some good meetings with FEMA. Heather Dumas, and she has been very helpful in putting us in the right direction to be able to get a generator for the high school, which is where they're was our main priority. But they're now looking at potentially that we might be able to get one for Leeds and Green. Which actually the FEMA money is gonna be 75% of that is gonna be, or would pay for it, and the other 25% we'd have to pick up the tab on. That would be.
But we can count that 25% can be counted in our time that we put into it, so it may not have to be cash.
Gotcha.
So.
I missed that.
Yeah.
See if you were there.
That's why that meeting gets counted. The meeting gets counted as the time.
Got it. Moving on, they discussed the water testing update. The testing, great news. All the schools are clear. There's no call for them. They all, the maintenance has been doing a great job of continuing flushing the systems. So a shout out to them. We've implemented the bus ride parent app. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that yet. It started out with Green. That is, we have 70% of the parent participation, which is amazing. So Green is the first guinea pig to it, and had one email, just a question on the actual program itself and how it works, and then that was it. But the now Leeds is starting tomorrow. They're going to be implementing it, and then all the other towns will start this. We'll speed up that process of making sure that there's no issues with it. And so far, it seems like it's working. And then moving on to transportation staffing update. We're
have lost some people, so that we're getting more crunched again on the transportation with buses, so we're gonna end up having to consolidate one route. We're still fully staffed by doing so, and we'll have one spare person to be able to help out with that, and we're in need of some more bus drivers, if anybody's out there that wants to jump into it.
Well, that's a change.
Where's with that kid?
I think he was pointing to the owls.
Explain to
The
them.
owl.
But if I would like to be a bus driver as well.
Like, I got a job.
Anthony. So that's all we had tonight?
Well, now I have questions.
Questions, yeah, okay.
Did, the question arise regarding the cross protection for the
I was so sad you weren't
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Dave provided, information about the site work and what the, cement work would do, and that
It met all the.
and the people who provided us estimates have done work throughout Turner, so.
And the roofing, system was not to snow load code, but it is being updated to be done with that, so.
Cement work was the question, though.
Yeah,
Dave
cement
was-
work
Dave
and
was there
the ability,
specifically, yeah.
because there supposedly was a pad, there's concern that,
Yep.
They got insulation.
so that it does have
There's
insulation going
underneath
on.
that, underneath the slab with 4-foot sonotubes going down in the ground.
That answers the question.
See, that was all for you, and then you didn't come. Just so sad.
Anyway,
That
moving on from giving Peter, here, curriculum and policy.
Yes, we did not meet tonight. Our next meeting is March 21st at 5 p.m. However, there are several policies on our consent agenda. So one of them is the second reading of KHC, which is the distribution of non-school materials. You'll remember that one. Admins were present for the meeting, all in support of that, and it's also current practice. And then there's two that we love to get rid of policies because there's so many, so it's nice to just be like, we actually don't need these anymore. So, emergency closings, that one's just really outdated. If you read it, it talks about, the automated calling system to the radio stations and the TV stations. We just don't do that anymore. So it's a policy that we don't need, given our text messaging and email capabilities now. And that is just an administrative procedure, no longer needs to be a policy. And then, adopt a school, also, it's just outdated. That's really taken care of in the strategic plan anyway. So, it's a program that we don't participate in. Most of us were like, what is this? So we're just recommending that we delete both of the policies.
Was it kind of like the programs where you used to like adopt the
No,
highway kind of thing where you can,
no, it's not even like, if you read the policy, it's not even an official program. It's just a policy trying to encourage collaboration with local businesses and stuff, which we do through
so it's kind of like you adopt the, kind of thing with the business.
yeah, but there's no money involved or anything like that.
They're not donating money.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just really unclear about that, just because we do have community connections.
We do, yeah.
But it doesn't mean, we don't need a policy to govern. I just.
Great. Your next meeting,
I said that.
did you say at the beginning?
March 21st.
Very
at
good.
5 p.m. So not 5:35.
5 o'clock.
You want me to come?
I just felt like that was the theme of the night, so.
There's some. Is that the tagline?
Come back.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Our next meeting is March 20th at 5 p.m. I did not state that.
Very good. Thank you.
His is the 20th.
All right. Reporting out on the Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations, Jessica?
Yeah, so we last met as a full group, the negotiating team, ESP team, back on February 6th, I believe. We met again this week on Tuesday, just as a negotiation team to review some information that had come to us from ESP and just preparation for our next group meeting. Which I believe it's the fifth.
That's coming Tuesday.
Yeah.
Very good. Student representative report, Sydney?
Yeah, I have a couple things. The boys hockey team has another playoff game on Saturday in Brooklyn. And on March fifth, Key Club is doing their annual blood drive. So it's good to participate.
Very good. Very good, thank you. Again, Assistant Superintendent Gills is not here, but we do have our superintendent here.
I am only gonna say that there's a job description in the consent agenda for the high school assistant principal. There's minimal changes there, but we are working our way through to try and make sure that everything is updated. So not many changes there. You'll see periodically job descriptions as we go forward, but that's all I have to say earlier. Good.
Okay, sounds good. So that will move us on to the consent agenda. We've touched on a couple of these things, but I'll read through it here. We have item 9.1, consideration and approval of the Curriculum and Policy Committee's recommended second reading and adoption of new policy KHC, distribution of non-school materials. Item 9.2 is consideration and approval of the Curriculum and Policy Committee recommended deletion of policies EBCD, MSAD52 emergency closings, and KGB adopt school. Also have 9.3, which is review and adoption of the superintendent recommended job descriptions, which is the adjustments to the assistant principal job description that just laid outlined. And item 9.4, which is consideration and approval of the finance committee recommended December operating and expenditure reports. Does anyone, yes, go ahead, Mr. Felstad.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second for that? Is that a second, Peter? Sure. Yeah. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Moving on. We have no old business, so we'll be going to new business, which is to entertain a motion to approve an out-of-state field trip for 11 area high schools art class to Boston Museum of Art and Quincy Market on April 10th, 2024. Tammy, or second from Bree. Discussion. Yes.
I will declare a conflict of interest because I have volunteered to be a chaperone because my daughter's on the trip.
Okay.
No pressure, everybody.
Anyone else?
Well, did we already decide he's driving?
Yes, we did.
Here's your airplane.
The bus driver.
Hop on, kids. I'll just say 93 kids are scheduled to go.
Oh,
Big
okay.
trip. Yeah, I thought that was an important number. I want to say it out loud. Yeah,
Very exciting.
93 kids.
Very exciting. Anyone else?
I wanna go.
Yeah. Well, you should have volunteered. Anyway, all those in favor? It is unanimous. Okay.
I did.
Oh, yeah, one abstention.
I was an abstention. Sorry. One abstention. Moving on to the, we'll entertain a motion to approve the revised 23-24 board meeting schedule and budget process schedule. Does anyone like to make that motion?
Sure.
Brianna, seconded by Crystal. Discussion. I'm not sure I can start off on this one. I don't know if folks remember from some of the emails received, but we had a meeting scheduled that was in conflict because we had what was the teacher conferences, parent teacher conferences. So challenging for staff to be here, particularly on a budget night. So we had in kind of a as needed meeting schedule. So we have effectively filled that by canceling the 14th and bumping everything forward and absorbing that as needed meeting. So any questions around that? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Moving on to discussion of distribution of the fiscal year 25 budget. So I would say let's put a motion on the floor if anyone's willing to do so, to move towards an electronic distribution of the fiscal year 25 budget. Would anyone like to make that motion? Jamie, seconded by Crystal. Discussion. Yes, we shall elaborate. I'll
Who
actually
was the
let
second? Sorry.
Crystal,
Crystal.
go ahead and elaborate.
So Gabby and I wanted to bring this on the table. We don't I'm not sure I have an opinion, maybe I do. Can you just, what the cost is right now for distributing the book? And this is the budget book that gets mailed to all households. That's what
So
we're
it's
talking about.
roughly $1,600 to print it and then another $700 to distribute and mail to all of the houses in the district.
Yeah, so initially I was thinking when we were talking about this, the budget meeting, or the agenda meeting, that we were talking about this, which is not what we were talking. We were talking about a physical book that gets mailed to every household in town.
That has to be mailed.
So that's the question. Yeah.
I'm sorry, roughly $1,600 to print and $700 to mail. And it will cost more to mail it this year because the postal service has increased their rate several times.
Yep. So, there was some thought about saving that money and moving towards an electronic availability, so. Yeah, go ahead.
Not in the slightest. We have way too many people in this communities that, you know, are nowhere near technologically advanced to get it by email, no matter how you tell them.
Sure.
We're 10 years away from that happening.
Sure, I said it.
I would think that if we were gonna do that, we really need to do some front loading. People need to know ahead of time, not the year or a month before or 2 months before. You know, I think that perhaps for the future, that might be something, but I don't think for this year.
Sure.
I'm just thinking my parents who can't even, you know, he has a flip phone. It's a special order, you know, just not happening.
Sure. Go ahead.
I would love to see if, in the future, if we could, look at the possibility of people opting in or out. Like, and I don't know how we would do that, but, maybe there'd be some way that people could indicate which method they'd like, because I assume that there'd be, you know, I'm not gonna say a 50-50 distribution, but there would be a significant amount of people that would be very content with an electronic version, and another portion that would very much like to have the paper in front of them that they can highlight and pore over and bring to the meeting. So I don't know how that would happen, but that seems like the perfect.
So it seems like a nightmare for
Keep organized.
that one. To be honest with you, either one or the other, because that combination would be a nightmare.
Go ahead, Crystal.
In the spirit of potentially doing this maybe next year or something, maybe this year, I loved how you did last year, when you zoomed into like our PTC, maybe recording one of those and making sure, you did do that, or maybe pushing it harder this year and saying, we're hoping to go paperless next year or semi. I love the idea of maybe somehow, I don't know how you would, I have no idea. It would probably have to go through the town, that they would have to send something out to all of the people in each town.
It's just,
Go ahead, Ken.
Just that it's a communication piece, and there's something really, at least for my generation, something about holding it in your hand and saying, oh, yeah, and you're gonna be able to touch it when it's not in front of you and it's on the screen, you forget it, you know? And it gets worse as you get older, so.
So maybe everyone that still has a Sun Journal tube, we could put their book in the Sun Journal tube.
Are you gonna drive it around? You looking for a picture?
I have a Sun
I'm
Journal.
glad you do.
Hey, easy on that. My parents have a Sun Journal too.
Go ahead, Brianna.
It doesn't sound like we're moving in the direction to go digital this year, but we're throwing out ideas and suggestions for what might be in a few years' time. If it were to have the option to be able to have digital as well as printout, can we like have some copies that can be at town offices? And those that want to be able to have the paper copy can just go to the town office to pick up. And maybe we reduce the number of how many we print to a select number based on town size and say, you know, town of Leeds, you're gonna get this many, Green and Turner, so forth, and have them available at town office for people to be able to pick up. And there, even if they don't drive, but they know a neighbor who can pick it up for them or another relative, they would be able to have the access to the paper copy, but maybe cutting costs. Again, not necessarily for this year, but something to think about in the future to be able to split it. Those that want it, I'm of the generation that does enjoy electronic things and not having mail piled up on my kitchen counter or dining room table, that sort of thing. So there are some, and we've got a lot of different people moving into our communities, that are gonna be like that. And, so being able to have the option, I think, for people might be having it posted somewhere on town websites, on the school website, but also having a few paper copies people can pick up at town offices.
Good here.
I'm gonna try to relax myself because this thing will infuriate me beyond belief. It's like we're trying to hide our budget. The first thing that's gonna come from this is we're trying to hide. We're not trying to show our budget. 3/4, 4/5 of our community have no current affiliation with the schools right now. So anything we do through the school system is focusing solely on a very specific group of people. Most of them only know about it when they get the budget book. If us just trying to keep it away from certain generations, certain people who are not technologically advanced, and say, okay, if you want it, then you have to go find your way to go get it, to me is an insult to anybody who isn't there comfortably yet. You know, I have no doubt in the future, but I'm seriously thinking this is 10 years away. Because this is just like, I've thought in years past, any sort of notification that goes out regarding the budget or elections on school systems, I think should never happen. Because that's something the school is doing only towards people in the school, not the community as a whole. So I think we have to be very careful in how it looks, as well as the ability for everybody to get it equally. And that's just my concern moving forward.
Yeah, no, it's a good concern. I'm hopeful that people aren't seeing it quite that way, that I don't think it was.
I can see a group.
I can see people interpreting it that way now that you raise it so much, but I certainly when we were initially talking about it, I mean, I see it across all kinds of different, like, I mean, a good example might be like hunting and fishing regulations, right? I mean, they really are pushing the PDF version now. There are a few hard copies that are still in town offices, but state levels, all across these different different sets of printed materials is moving electronic. So perhaps we're not quite there, but perhaps we should be thinking about moving there and how do we transition there, even if it is over the course of years.
And as it was said earlier in regards to having the new option, I would step very far away from having a sign in, sign out. But if we had the electronic option available for people to go get, in addition to the mailed one being mailed to them, over time, people get used to that electric one being there.
Yeah.
Because once that electric one's established, it's not like it's a huge deal to have it sitting there at our, on our website or on our Facebook page or connection or whatever. So having it there and getting people to say, okay, you're gonna get in the mail, but here it is electronically as well, if you wish to, and then eventually you start getting people to go there. But you've got a generation, I hate to say it, but you've got at least a generation to die off before you get too close to it.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I'll just make sure that I'm very clear that there's no recommendation, right? That's why it's sort of like the thing, we just do these things all the time and every once in a while it's worth having the conversation. So I just wanna, I actually appreciate what you're saying, and the district I live in stopped doing the paper version last year and I was very conflicted by it. So I absolutely understand that. I think anything that we do, I just wanna make sure that we have the conversation periodically to make sure that people still wanna keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, this seems to me that if we were to go this route someday, it would probably be something where people would still have to opt in, because as far as I know, there's no email list for all of the citizens in the towns. Which I just sort of raise that as a problem, because how would people leave, if you're tuned out because you're 68 years old, your kids are long out of the system, how would you even know that it's budget season? Then how would you know that you have to go look for it? So I just toss that out as just another kind of problem.
I was gonna make a motion to call the vote, because I feel like we've talked about this a lot. I think we're ready.
We're ready.
We have other people there.
I don't see anyone else interested in speaking, so we probably don't even need to vote on that. Let's just move forward with it. All those in favor of the motion, which is to move to an electronic. Seeing none, all those opposed. It is
Another
unanimous
unanimous vote.
opposition. Unanimous opposition.
All right,
The motion failed.
thank you for that clear guidance.
So, thank you all.
We've ever done that. That's
No.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow, we're friends.
What a bad idea that was. Yeah. All right.
I did not take recommendation.
Anyway, so we're moving into 11:4, which is an executive session. We'll have another executive session out of that and then hopefully adjourn relatively soon. So we'll take a motion to request an executive session to discuss the Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations, ESP. Pursuant to one MRSA 4056D3, seconded by Crystal. All those in favor of going to executive session? That is unanimous.